Blackhawks fans, welcome into the Four Feathers podcast. It's season 6, episode 8. Johnny Nani coming at you with my guy Ron Luce for a little midweek hockey talk. Ron, how you doing today, my friend?
Johnny, I'm doing well. It's always good to be on the microphone. Always good talking Blackhawks with you, my friend. And it's just kind of a nice way to celebrate the middle of the week. Happy hump day to you, my friend. Just ready to get into what these last 3 games mean for the Blackhawks and look at what's to come on the West Coast. But very excited to be back with you, my friend. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, Ron. Yeah, it was interesting because last time Tony and I were on this episode, these airwaves building character. Thought that was going to work towards something, and then they go out and drop their first 2 of this. They did save it with an overtime win. We'll get into all of our takeaways from the past 3 games, and we'll talk a little bit line blunder. The title of this episode, line blunder, go Brrr. We'll talk about that and how that's playing into Connor Bedard's scoring struggles. Some roster updates. CHSN updates. We actually have some more concrete info on that stuff, and we'll do our usual ruffle some feathers, stick taps, and take a look at what's on tap next. All right, before we get into anything, per usual, make sure you're subscribed over on YouTube at On Tap Sportsnet. Give us a follow on the socials at Four Feathers Pod and at On Tap Sportsnet. And as always, visit ontapsportsnet.com for all your Chicago sports, literature, and podcasting needs. Okay, Ron, we jump into this one. As I had mentioned, the Blackhawks go 1-2-0 over this 3-game stretch. 4-1 loss versus Detroit, 3-1 loss at Dallas, 2-1 overtime win against Minnesota. Ron, I was excited to see the Hawks see how they could build on their momentum that they could have said they had going in there, but a couple of days off, getting home, and they came out looking flat and didn't play their best game Wednesday, and that carried over in the second half of back-to-back against Dallas. I was pretty disappointed with both of those efforts.
Yeah, I think the disappointment maybe was a little more expected with Dallas because it was the second half of a back-to-back. You're going on the road to Dallas after being in Chicago. So, it's not the easiest flight in the world. It's still like a 2.5-hour flight to get to Dallas. You get in late, you got a day on the road just after playing. So that one I was maybe, and Dallas, let's just be honest, Dallas is one of the best teams in the Western Conference. So I kind of expected maybe not the greatest showing against Dallas. I think the Detroit one's a little more disappointing, though, Johnny, because, like you said, you generated some momentum. You were hoping to kind of help establish that, and you're at home. Home cooking has been kind of the forte of this Blackhawks team under Luke Richardson thus far, especially with far inferior talented teams typically on a night-to-night basis. Just a poor effort. It's nice to see guys like Bertuzzi get involved. Had an assist in that game, as you mentioned, against the aforementioned game against Detroit. Try saying that 10 times fast, Johnny. And then, rips home a goal in that Dallas game. So you love to see, one of your guys that's going to be here for 4 years contributing on the score sheet, Cifalino having the equalizer at the time in that Red Wings game. But you just wonder, you kind of look around and you go, what the hell happened to the rest of the offense? Where are these guys? What is going on? And, maybe is some of that line blending going Brrr, maybe going Brrr because it's making everybody cold and not playing their best games.
Yeah, we'll get into the effects of that in a little bit, Ron. But what I was most disappointed with is that they weren't winning battles, and their structure breaks down when that happens. They're not a team that is built to run and gun. It's just the way that the roster is constructed right now, the talent that's there, even though you do have Bedard, you do have some interesting pieces in terms of Kurashev and your Tavos and Tyler Bertuzzi, who you'd like to see some more from. But that's just not the way that they're built. And guess what? When they got back to the way that they need to play, although it may be a little bit boring and not show up on every highlight reel on NHL Network or on social media, they did a much better job, especially shutting down a high-octane offense that the Wild have in Kaprizov on Sunday. And, much thanks to Jason Dickinson. One of my takeaways from this, Ron, before we get into the line blender stuff, is that Jason Dickinson is perhaps the most important forward on this team, even more so than Connor Bedard, due to his two-way contributions.
I don't think you're far off, Johnny. I really don't. It's incredible to see. I believe it was Mario Tirabassi that tweeted out kind of the trade tree of that Vancouver deal that brought Dickinson to Chicago. And it's incredible how Riley Stillman, who just went on waivers, in case anybody listening at home didn't see that, Riley Stillman nets you not only a second round pick, but also Jason Dickinson, who, as you mentioned, probably the most important Blackhawks forward right now. What he's doing, again, a guy that got Selke votes on a terrible Hawks team a year ago. I think if this team has any tangible improvements, I think he's going to be even higher in the Selke voting the way he's playing. And in addition to that, again, also why it's so important for them to get him going at home, because not only does he shut down the top line, have you seen the splits, Johnny, when he scores? In his career as a Blackhawk, they have a winning record when Jason Dickinson scores.
Yep.
I mean, that is fantastic stuff from Hari and now Jason Dickinson. It's incredible how you have Jason Dickinson and you essentially netted two other first round picks in Sasha Boisvert and Merrick Van Acker, because that second round pick was used in that big trade with the Islanders that a lot of people kind of forget about. So you got two high prospects that are now in the farm that could be contributors here in the future. And you have Jason Dickinson all for, a couple seasons of Riley Stillman just to go on waivers from Vancouver. What a trade by Kyle Davidson at the end. But agreeing with you, Johnny, because of what he does and how he shuts down the top forward lines. It's not even just like, oh, he's your best defensive forward, so that's why he's important. No, like he is truly an elite defensive forward, and you see it on a night in, night out basis. And I agree, Johnny. I think if he's a guy that if he continues to do what he's doing, even as a 30-something-year-old when his 2-year deal's up, I think this is a guy that's arguably allowing himself to rub into the conversation of, you are a part of the next great Blackhawks team because what you bring, not only at the center position, but also on the defensive front as well.
Right. I mean, think about how guys like that were valued. Obviously, a little bit different play styles, but your Michael Frolik's of the world, your Marcus Kruger's of the world when he was in his prime, right? Very, very reliable defensively. So there is value in those style of players. And like I said, I'd go out and right now, I would say that Jason Dickinson is the most important Blackhawks forward. Obviously, we know in the long term it's Connor Bedard, because you're going to need that elite production if you are going to get over the hump and be sitting at the top of standings instead of hovering near the bottom of them like they are right now. But as it currently stands, as we are here in the year 2024, the right now, Jason Dickinson, probably the most important Hawks forward, because you see the results. Guess what? The results matter. Nick Foligno's talked about it. You got to find a way to win, and they talked about the character that it took to win that game at Anaheim after pulling off the comeback at LA. Well, they found a way to win on Sunday. They shut it down for the most part for the first two periods, and then they conceded a goal in the third period when Minnesota really started pushing again, but they held on just enough at the end to force overtime. And then in that overtime, once again, defensive play setting it up. You had Philip Khrushchev and Taylor Hall converging on a pinching defenseman, and that puck gets turned over. Khrushchev goes the other way. Wrists it home with Seth Jones driving the net, sends the United Center crowd home happy. So that was good that we are now talking about a 1-2 stint here instead of an 0-3 one, because that would be definitely more down in the dumps here. But Ron, part of the struggles are because Connor Bedard's not scoring. Why aren't the Blackhawks winning more? Why aren't the Blackhawks scoring more? Because Connor Bedard is not scoring. Now, part of that can be chalked up to the namesake of this episode. Line blender, go Brrr. All right, Ron, just a few names that Connor Bedard has seen rotate in and out on his wings recently. You've had Lucas Reichel, Ryan Donato, Taylor Hall, Nick Foligno. Obviously, Philip Khrushchev has been up there earlier in the season. Teuvo Teravainen. That line's going to be back together. Khrushchev, Bedard, Teravainen, because they looked at the numbers like Luke Richardson said they would, and they like that one of the best, and it's hard to argue when you have some statistical backing there. But Ron, some people will go and say, oh, this is all Luke Richardson's fault, and he's not letting anybody develop any chemistry and this and that. It's a tough job. I think they are going to be making the right decision here, and I do think they will let this one ride a little bit due to the pre-established chemistry that Connor Bedard and Philip Khrushchev have see all of last season.
Absolutely. And I think too, kind of looking back to Sunday's win, you can see that Khrushchev still has the offensive potential. They're finally skating him routinely on that second power play unit as well. And I think that's helped at least the power play look more competent for that second unit over the course of the season, now that he and Taylor Hall are kind of together on that unit. But I think that line makes the most sense, Johnny, like not because of just what you said in terms of numbers and things like that, and obviously Khrushchev's relationship, but we saw the spark that came from Bedard playing with Teravainen as well. And unfortunately, I think the only thing that line is missing is a little bit more dig and retrieve per se. I don't necessarily think they need the physical.
Yeah, it would be nice if Tyler Bertuzzi was just a little faster, right?
Exactly. Like I think, you know, you don't necessarily need the physicality. You don't need a Pat Maroon necessarily on that line. But I think what's going to need to happen is guys like Philip Kurashev are going to need to become more of those go a little harder into the corners and win puck battles kind of guys. And I think even Teuvo Teravainen is going to need to do a little bit more of that as well. Not to say that Connor Bedard can't do that, but typically that's the job of your wingers, right? Not necessarily the job always of your center to go down and get into those puck battles unless it's behind the net. So I'm excited to see them try and do something here on the road. You know, it's hard because everybody knows what the Blackhawks have to offer. Of course, they're going to try to shut down Connor Bedard, especially if they have the second change when the Blackhawks are on the road. He's the only legitimate weapon. And even with that, he still has 13 points in 16 games. I mean, he's still putting up very respectable offensive total. So hopefully this group can kind of get it going, because I think then at the end of the day, it just helps the rest of your lineup look more refreshed as well, right? Your second group still has some scoring ability, but you know, kind of your off-pace group, Dickinson line is your defensive group who can certainly score. They've shown that. And then I kind of want to see Lukas Reichel return to his role on the fourth line and, you know, really continue that chemistry he has with Pat Maroon and Craig Smith.
Yeah, there was that Ben Pope story about his off-ice relationship with Pat Maroon, but the on-ice connection with Craig Smith is outstanding there. And I understand there's going to be people that are upset about it because, we need to give Lukas Reichel and Connor Bedard a longer look together. That is a very, very, very tough line for Luke Richardson to deploy and trust defensively. I'm sorry, it's just not there yet. And I know it's, you know, at some point, you know, what's the point? Like, we're going to have to, you know, this is not a season where we're making the playoffs anyway. Tank. You can have that mindset to it. But at the same time, then you're going to go and turn around and say, well, this is an evaluation season for Luke Richardson because he has it. Well, guess what? He's putting out lines that he thinks can, you know, help them win hockey games. And that doesn't just come in the offensive zone. You have to think about neutral zone battles. You have to think about in your defensive zone. And if you get hemmed, can you retrieve the puck? Align with Lukas Reichel, Connor Bedard, and who else they had up there at one point, Ryan Donato. They're not digging out too many pucks in the defensive zone if they get trapped. So I think that's some of the reasoning behind it. We'll see if it works. Ron, I think this groupings that were displayed in Wednesday's practice are kind of a return to what had given them the most. It's hard to say that because they've been so up and down this year, but sustained success, or at least sustained chemistry so far this year, like you'd mentioned, the connection in that odd fourth line that just happened to work, though, between Craig Smith, Lukas Reichel, Pat Maroon there, and then your defensive line, you get Joey Anderson back in there, recovered from his illness. I know that took him out for a little while. But he plays well alongside Dickinson. You have Donato, who's a good complement there. And then your second line is what you really need to step up here, Ron. Obviously, you'd like to see Bedard start pouring in the goals on the top line, but second line then, that would require Tyler Bertuzzi and Taylor Hall to start turning it on. And those are guys that you need supplementary scoring from there.
Yeah, supplementary scoring indeed. And I think you've seen a little bit of it from Bertuzzi at times. I think he certainly finds good rhythm. I think he and Nick Foligno have pretty decent chemistry as well when Foligno's the 2C. But Johnny, like you and I talked about just a few episodes ago, right? Your 2C, the future is still in Rockford, albeit having a phenomenal season in Rockford as Frank Nazar. But, you know, they need to just be able to battle through. And I think at least what they have going for them with that second line is it's a group of veterans that know how to play together, and they're going to be able to figure it out, right? Bertuzzi's the youngest guy on that line, and he's still been in the league for 8 years? I mean, that's hard to come across and a refreshing sight if you're the Blackhawks, especially after what we've seen over the last 2 seasons, what this team has rolled out as a second line at times. So hopefully they can find some kind of chemistry. Like you said, we've kind of seen flashes from that line, I think, at times this year. But if they can get any kind of sustained success over, you know, a 5, 6, 7 game sprint, I think that's actually going to help Connor Bedard, because then teams just have to respect that line just a little bit more. And maybe he gets a couple of those, you know, even if it's 3 or 4 shifts a game where he gets a better matchup for what Connor Bedard wants to do. We all know the talent level and what he can do if you give him an opportunity at the right place and at the right time. And maybe that's all he needs to kind of get that scoring going and continue to be the playmaker and the sniper I think that people expect him to be.
Yep, you know what, that with that top line, just thinking about that, when you have Khrushchev, Bedard, and Tavo on that, their best bet at staying together is dictating terms when they're on the ice, and that means they're playing defense by just having the puck the most. That's what they really need to key in on, and make it a point of urgency to do that, because, like I said, when that unit gets hemmed in, it's going to be tough, especially on the road, with the second change there. So
Defense,
or the first, yeah.
playing keep away.
Yeah.
More or
Right.
less.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, you want to drive scoring and all of that, but they'll get themselves in trouble if they stay in their defensive zone. But if they can, push in the offensive zone cycle, okay, get some, multiple looks going. I think that was a problem when they had Hall and Reichel up there. No one's really retrieving pucks there unless 98 magically becomes that on a shift. It's mostly a one and done unit, whereas I think this could give them a little bit more retrieval ability just due to Tavo's smarts and Khrushchev. Like you said, you just got to ramp it up. Some of that want to along the boards there wouldn't hurt if 98's going behind the net and grabbing them as well. So we'll see. I will say this though, as long as the structure is mostly sound, Thursday against Seattle, regardless of the result, whether they win, lose, whatever, I think Luke will at least keep these units together through this road trip, and if not into Tuesday against Anaheim, before they really think about making any changes, because by the time they come home, that'll be the next time they even have a chance to, won't even be a formal practice. I'd assume they have Monday off, or actually, I don't know, they might have practice Monday, but that would be the only time to regroup there. So I think it'll stay together for this one, and like I said, I just hope that they find some consistency, some success here with these units, so we don't have to continue with Line Blender going brrr.
Indeed. Yeah. A little bit of chemistry, I think, is all that Blackhawks fans, and I'm sure the players, are also looking for too, right? You find a little bit of that. We know that third line's got the chemistry. We know that fourth line's got the chemistry. Can your top six find that same chemistry? And again, maybe, just maybe, it starts to generate some results and maybe get some quality wins against, respectable opponents. I mean, there's certainly a couple of games we're looking at here, a lot of good teams.
Certainly a beatable team in Seattle. So I'm excited. I'm excited to watch that one. Like I said, we're hoping for the best there, that they can, start building something here. All right, Ron. Elsewhere on the roster, looks like Alec Martinez could be returning from his right groin injury. Still on IR technically, but the Hawks sent Isaac Phillips down to Rockford on Monday, and Richardson said it's a possibility that Martinez returns for Thursday's game against Seattle. That'll be nice to have that kind of stabilize some pairs on the back end there. Laurent Brossoit, update on him. Still no timeline. It was kind of a discouraging update that Richardson gave last week, but he was out on the ice practicing today, kind of rotating in as the third goalie. Unfortunately, no concrete timeline for his return. This is turning into a longer term thing than was initially reported, initially hoped. So we'll just have to see. In my opinion, just keep it up, Arvid Soderblom. He's bailing out both the Hawks and Laurent Brossoit right now on this. Ron, the other one, Andreas Athanasiou, placed on waivers Monday, cleared, went down to Rockford, scores 2 goals in his debut in their kind of 10 a.m. Game today. What were your thoughts on that when you saw AA hit the waiver wire?
Yeah, I think I am happy that they were willing to put him on waivers. And we kind of talked amongst ourselves as the Four Feathers crew when that news broke. And, I kind of said in the chat, like, he's probably going to clear because nobody's going to take on his 4.25, given the fact he hasn't played. And when he has played, he hasn't been terribly effective so far this season. But I think it's good that the Hawks are willing to do this with guys, especially if you're not getting into the lineup, because at least now he's getting game action. He's getting his legs under him, and maybe he's just going to help build some of that confidence again. Especially for him, this is a huge season for Andreas Athanasiou because, production on the ice for the Chicago Blackhawks and their success be damned, is you as an individual player, you're playing for a new contract next season. And if you're not able to put together, a good, even 40, 50 games this year, you're probably not going to get more than maybe the veteran minimum from some team next year in free agency. Maybe you get like $1 million if you're lucky for one season. Good to see him go down there, kind of accept it in stride, right? We haven't really heard any reports of like Athanasiou being pissed. I'm sure he's not happy about it. Let's be real. But, he took it in stride, suits up today, gets third line center, but scores what, 28 seconds into the game for the first one, and it was him using his speed to beat a defender and the forehand backhand for the goal past the goalie, and then another one just kind of a crazy angle shot that he rips home. You'll love to see that from him, and maybe, right, if he's got his confidence back, he's using his speed again, maybe he's an injection of life into this lineup that they so desperately needed. There's a reason they paid him $4.25 per season after that 40-point campaign that he had in 2022. They want him to just get back to that because he really did at times look like the best Blackhawks forward on the ice. And ever since then, whether it's been injury related or just performance related, hasn't fully lived up to that again. So I think it's good that he's down there. At least he's going to get minutes, which he wasn't getting right now in Chicago. And maybe he forces the Hawks' hand by putting up 10 points in like 7 or 8 games, and they bring him back up and he gets a shot in the lineup. And maybe that's just the shot in arm he needs to not only add some complementary offense, which is what we've been talking about already here on this show. Maybe he can settle in as your 2-line center, and that gives you just a little bit of boost from an offensive standpoint moving forward.
Yep, it's just tough with him. His fit is tough on this team right now when you look at their needs, because you had mentioned 2C, and he did get, once again, people are going to complain about this. It was a short run. It was a game that Tony and I were at against Vancouver, right? So he's just not as defensively sound as he needs to be a full-time centerman. And he definitely, given his speed, fits better on the wing. But is that speed detracted from due to the injury that kept him out for a majority of last season? I don't know. He looked pretty spry today. He was flying all over the ice. So I know Luke Richardson said it was a matter of matching up the skill, matching up the confidence with the skill. I really hope that can all click, because inevitably injuries are going to happen. He's probably going to get called back up here at some point after a bit of a stint in Rockford. So we'll have to see. I just, for the Blackhawks' sake, I hope that skill is matched up with confidence, and you can at least get by with him, and he's producing enough to where, okay, maybe we can live with some of the defensive deficiencies. That's why it makes him a tough fit. That's why he's only played 5 games this year. That's why he found himself on waivers, and that's why he finds himself, skating circles around guys in the AHL right now. So we'll see. We'll monitor that. Stay tuned over at Four Feathers Pod on socials for any updates regarding Andreas Athanasiou. All right, Ron, an update of a different sort here. I was happy to be away from this discussion for a couple of weeks, but CHSN actually has some concrete news. No, it's not Xfinity adding it, although they are offering a credit instead of just reducing their price for the RSN fee. So per Jeff Agris of the Chicago Sun-Times, that offers hope. They said this is a positive because instead of, if they would have just lowered the price if they never intended on carrying it, but giving the credit means that they do intend to carry it at some point. We'll see how long this standoff goes on. But Ron, the big news is that CHSN is reportedly ready to drop their direct-to-consumer app later this week, sounding like Friday. Details and pricing still TBA, but Agris did report that it would probably be similar to Marquee's price point of $19.99 per month. Additionally, Bulls and Hawks full season ticket holders are supposed to get a complimentary subscription for the remainder of the season starting Friday. That's per Scott Powers of The Athletic. Ron, thoughts on this whole debacle?
Well, Johnny, I think like you and I both talked about in the pre-show, I think we're both uber excited for when this doesn't become a habitual segment on Four Feathers, hopefully before we turn the calendars to 2025. But I think at least it's nice just to hear that it seems like everything's largely positive, right? Yes, they're bringing the direct-to-consumer app out, which is good. Worst case scenario, it gives people options, right? If you have Hulu, for example, and I know there's a lot of discussions that they're still talking to Hulu about carrying their service, but if you do have Hulu or you have YouTube TV and you're that desperate to watch this team, I know there's a lot of people out there who are bitching and moaning, saying they won't pay for it. Whatever, I don't care. You make your own decisions, but at least it's giving people that option. So I think to me, that's a positive step in the right direction with the direct-to-consumer app. In addition to that, I think, like you said, Comcast offering the credit, at least it shows that they have some inclination of eventually carrying it on their, on their platform. And then a pretty cool little thing if you're a complimentary season ticket holder, right? Or a full season ticket holder. Sucks for Tony and I because we're a half season ticket holders, so we don't get CHSN for the app for the rest of the year.
Add that up and get one, and then share the login.
Yeah, really. Yeah, can we just share it? Is that possible? But no. In all seriousness, again, we're tired of talking about it, but at least this update has largely been positive, in my opinion, in terms of where they're getting to. And eventually then it's just, you have the options. Here's what it is. And if you don't like it, tough fucking shit. You can bitch all you want on X, but at least you have access to the product. If you don't want to pay it, don't pay it. I don't care. Don't change my decisions of what I do. But at least as a consumer who right now is using an antenna to watch games, and if God forbid, like this evening, it's raining, you really aren't getting much in terms of the antenna. I did the Marquee app for a while. I know how that goes as a Cubs fan when I was in between service with Xfinity and such. So I know how that works. And it's quite nice because usually you can have 20 devices if it's anything close to what Marquee did. You have tons of opportunity, and yes, it costs more. But if you're paying $20 to the app or $20 additional dollars to Comcast, what the fuck's the difference? So again, positive direction. Can't wait for this to no longer be on the rundown, Johnny. And I know you feel the same way, but at least it's moving in the right direction.
Yeah, Ron, you want a preview of what next week's CHSN discussion is going to be?
Oh, do tell.
It's that the app is trash because the user 100%. Experience is terrible and it doesn't load and this and that. So I can't wait for that. We'll just wait to see how those, reports pile in. I won't be doing it. Luckily, I'm a DirecTV customer, so I've had a CHSN since the beginning. Unfortunately, I can't relate to the plight of the people dealing with the Comcast stuff, having to fiddle with antennas and all of that. But Ron, just given CHSN's sort of user experience of their digital offerings in terms of their website, social media, and whatnot, it just leads me to believe that there are going to be issues on that front. Who knows? It could be perfect when it rolls out, and that'd be great. So you don't have to hear the complaints. But I just have this inkling that there's going to be some issues with it that need to be rectified. I mean, think about just in terms of presentation, right? Remember the score bug issue when preseasons started and they got hounded to hell for that, so then they had to change that and now it looks fine and all of that, but it took a little bit for that to get right. Their website, there's not really too much going on their website, so you just have to wonder if that's the level of product that they offer in terms of user experience on some of their sort of platforms right now. It doesn't inspire too much faith in the app, but we'll see. If you do have the app and you have issues or you think it's great when it does roll out, if you do get it, let us know on Four Feathers, because I don't think any of our panelists here will be indulging in the app.
Yeah, I'm hoping to not have to indulge in the app, but I will never say never, Johnny. But can you just imagine, though, how mad everybody would be if it actually works really well, though? I think people are just going to be equally as
what
mad.
What can I complain about now?
Yeah, what am I going to bitch about now?
Yeah, well, like I said, I get it. I understand the frustration of not being able to access your teams. We're not trying 100%. To, minimize that, diminish that. We get it. But there has just been constant, some factors out of the control, like, YouTube TV, they're not carrying RSNs, period. So sorry, I understand that might have been your go-to provider, and it might have been cheaper than the other options out there, but that's just the nature of it. Guess why it's cheaper? Because they're not paying those fees to pick up RSNs, right? So, stuff like that. There's a lot of factors at play here. So any updates on that, we'll provide them over at Four Feathers Pod on social media. All right, that does it. CHSN, we'll resume that next week. Let's get into our regular segments, Ron, and it's Ruffle Some Feathers. Do you have any?
Johnny, I think for the first time this season, I have no feathers to ruffle. So the floor is yours, my friend.
All right, I'll start it off. These last three games the Hawks played were technically rivalry games when you go by the book, right? Detroit, we all know the history of that. Obviously, now it's split up. They only play twice a year because of the Eastern Conference, Western Conference thing. Dallas, a Central Division opponent on Thursday, and then Minnesota, another Central Division opponent. Both teams you play 4 times this year in this slate that we just had. Ron, the Hawks rivalries are stale, and I understand part of that is because the Hawks haven't been very good in recent years, but I just think to baseball fandom, and you're a Cubs fan, you despise Milwaukee, you despise St. Louis, right?
100%.
Even there's some, rough. There's been some brawls and stuff with Cincinnati and whatnot. There's always some tension there. As a White Sox fan, I despise all other AL Central teams, right? Whenever we play them, it's like, and I know the first response will be, well, that's like 13 times a year in baseball. Well, scale it down, Ron. Hockey is only 82 games, not 162 games like baseball. So you scale it, the most games that you're going to play percentage-wise are still against your division rivals. And I just miss the fire and the passion of some of the rivalries, Ron. And I know the Hawks need to get better. That's an immediate go-to for this to improve this situation and what I'm ruffling feathers about here. But I want some of that hatred back for even the Wild and the Stars. And I know St. Louis and Nashville will probably always be the bigger ones in this sort of just due to regional and, some history between those clubs there. But, you got another one here. I know some rivalries can be built in the playoffs, like the one against Canucks. But man, I long for the days when it was like, hell yeah, we're playing the Canucks tonight. We hate the Canucks, right? Those kind of days. I'm not expecting that one to come back anytime soon. But, You got your few Detroit sucks obligatory chants on Wednesday at the UC, but then you go out and lay an egg, and it's like, man, I just want some fire back in these rivalries because you play these teams frequently, aside from Detroit. But that's a historical one that, I still carry on the Detroit Sucks even when they're not playing Detroit, at the United Center. So I don't know. That's where my ruffle some feathers is, Ron. You got to take on that rivalry.
Yeah, I think you're not far off, and I agree with you, right? A lot of it is indicative of the Hawks being good and those rivals being good, right? So like right now, even let's assume the Hawks magically turned it around and we're in 100-point team somehow next season. You're probably only looking at rivalries with Colorado, who you've never really had a rivalry with, and Dallas, who I would make the same argument, You're probably looking at all those teams who, Winnipeg is another one, right? Winnipeg was the Atlanta Thrashers for a long time. So there's not a ton of history between those two. Same kind of with Colorado, right? They were always in the Mountain West division or whatever it was at the time, right? They weren't really in the Central until the realignment. And then you can make the same argument about Dallas, except when they were still the Minnesota North Stars. It just sucks that, the Wild are good, so you need the Hawks to be good, but like St. Louis isn't very good right now, and you're going to kind of get that feel. Nashville's not very good right now, right? So those rivalries have lost. I think that diminished because both teams are just not great at the time, when they play. And then on top of it, I agree with you. I think it's a travesty that Detroit's back in the East. I really do. I kind of hope there's an expansion team that comes along and they want to get to 34 for some reason, or somebody moves and it has to cause a realignment, because I would love to see Detroit come back. I get why they do it because of Eastern time zone. I fully understand, but it just sucks, man. It feels like we haven't had good rivalry hockey. Johnny, I'm gonna double down on your hot take here. Probably since the 2017 season when they got swept by Nashville.
Yep.
It's been a long time since we've really felt, in my opinion, like there's real rivalries between the Blackhawks and any of their divisional opponents.
Right. And I understand. I guess everyone's just going to say you have to be good for it, because you mentioned that 2017. Well, what was that? Last time they legitimately made a playoff, exclude the COVID bubble there. Right. There's storylines to be drawn, though. Like I said, the frequency in which you play them, and like against the Wild, like you have the Foligno brothers, and I know it's like all friendly and stuff and all of that, but it'd be nice if there was like a little fire between Marcus and Nick Foligno when there's a Hawks Wild game. They're gonna have 3 more meetings this year, right? So I don't know. You get on TNT and they try to hype it up, and this great original 6 rivalry. It doesn't feel like it has that same heat behind it. So they're stale right now, and that's my ruffle some feathers. We got to move on. Well, let's go a little more positive. Talk stick taps.
Johnny, stick taps for one of those great 6:00 starts. The Blackhawks and Wild on Sunday, 6:00 start at the United Center. Was very pleased to be able to actually tune into that one. Just some other obligations to On Tap Sports, not as well as other obligations, took me away from kind of having to watch the other 2 games that we have covered here tonight, kind of in and out. That was the one I just got to sit down and watch the whole way, and it was nice to see Philip Kurashev cap it off with an OT winner. There's just something nostalgic about one of those great 6:00 starts, Tony. So, or Johnny. So, Tony was in the building as well, which we love to see, even though he's not joining us here tonight. It made me, it saved, I think, my mood coming into the show, admittedly, with that OT winner. So that's my stick test, because the Hawks put together a good game. Peter Mrazek played great. They held off a good Wild team, and they got a big win at the UC, which you always love to see, especially in one of those great 6 o'clock starts.
Yep. All right. 2 notes on your stick tap there, Ron. One, I always hear, whenever I hear that phrase, one of those greats, I hear it in Eddie Olczyk's voice, and it's one of those great 6 o'clock starts.
Likewise, I do too.
number 2, the Blackhawks once again saved a Sunday for the city of Chicago. I know everybody's all worlds on fire over in Bears land, but guess what? If you tuned into the Hawks game on Sunday night, like Ron did, I know you were upset from the Bears loss, but guess what? You had a little jubilation, courtesy of Philip Kurashev, and a solid overall defensive effort from your Blackhawks, unlike you saw.
Sure did.
The Bears.
I almost put it away in my memory about the Bears game, because I agree with you. I was actually at Soldier Field on Sunday. So to depart from Soldier Field, sit down and watch the Hawks win, it really did save my Sunday, Johnny. So well put, my friend.
Yeah. All right. My stick tap goes out to Jeremy Roenick. JR was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame on Monday. It was a whole weekend of excellent festivities. They had the Hall of Fame game between the Wings and the Leafs. They had all their ceremonies throughout the weekend, and then the full induction ceremony with the presentation of the plaques and the speeches given on Monday. Chris Chelios presented the plaque, the honored member plaque, to Jeremy Roenick, so I thought that was cool. Obviously, Blackhawks connection there. And JR's speech, man, JR is a character. He is one of the hockey's greatest characters of all time, really. And his speech was just full of excellent stories, memories, got emotional, as JR is known to do. But Ron, I just got to shout it out. It was hilarious. Gave me a good chuckle when he jokingly told the story about how he convinced, I'm using finger quotes for our audio only listeners here, convinced the Blackhawks to draft him. And he said he was at a restaurant pre-draft, and Mike Keenan's in the urinal stall next to him. And Mike Keenan said, "Hey, kid, you got any balls?" And he said, "Enough to play for you." That is so JR, and it was just quintessential Jeremy Roenick for his Hockey Hall of Fame speech. It was great. I watched the whole ceremony. Cool to see, a rival in Shea Weber get inducted, as well as some of the other builders and women's hockey icons as well there. So Hockey Hall of Fame always does a good job with that. And one of our own, JR, getting inducted. Major stick taps on that front.
Yeah, two quick things to add there, Johnny. The first being the Hockey Hall of Fame is probably one of the coolest Hall of Fames in all of sports. I highly encourage people. First off, Toronto's a really cool city. So if you haven't gone, that's enough of a reason to go. Let me put it this way. The last time I was in Toronto was just after the Hawks won the third cup in 2015. So got to see that at the Hockey Hall of Fame as well, right? Their dedication to kind of the cup winner and things like that. It was so cool that my friend and I went twice in our visit to Toronto, because it's really that cool of a spectacle they put on. They do it right, as you mentioned. Not only is it just players, but it's also builders. It's also some of those that have continued to lift up the women's game, right? We have the PWHL now, which is a huge stride forward for professional women's hockey in really North America, right? They have a team in Toronto. So I think that's really cool. And yeah, they do it right, man. It's really cool to see. Hockey Hall of Fame is incredible. They do a phenomenal job. And two, I will say it was really cool, I think, because of what you said, Johnny. Jeremy Roenick is such a character, and you see a lot of those guys that crack jokes, and sometimes inappropriate jokes that get you thrown off of NBC, but that's neither here nor there. It's that big personality that people remember, but it was really cool to see him get emotional and talk about the call he got from Doug Wilson, who was a former teammate of his, right, with the Blackhawks, and telling him to come play for the Sharks. And it got him over the 500 goal mark, which is, largely what a lot of a lot of people look at when they do the Hockey Hall of Fame voting. And he got to that plateau because of it. And he even said he cleaned up his life as a result of it. He was going down a bad track. So I think that was really cool to see him dive into as well, because again, you get to see both sides of what a complex human being Jeremy Roenick is. And again, just an awesome speech. Cool to see Chris Chelios there as the presenter for him as well. Obviously, a lot of time spent with those two in the 90s in Chicago. So really, really job well done. And you put it perfectly, Johnny. I mean, the Hockey Hall of Fame is second to none. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic, and they did another great job this year.
Yep. One other note on JR's induction. I loved, I believe it was just a little blurb on the TNT pregame show before the Hawks and Wings on Wednesday. Obviously, this was preceding the Hockey Hall of Fame induction weekend, but I believe they had said Patrick Kane had sent Jeremy Roenick a text about it. And just as soon as they heard the news, they didn't relay anything else. All Kaner said was about damn time. One great American hockey player saluting another. I thought that was just cool.
Hell yeah.
So stick taps all around to Kane, Chelios, and JR in this round here. Okay, we move on. Ron, take a look at what's on tap next as we get close to closing the show here. Our predictions tracker from last week. Ron, I get another point, which means I have 2. Tony has 2 from his past predictions, and you are at 1 at the bottom of the barrel, my friend. I said 1-2-0 against Detroit, Dallas, and Minnesota. I thought they were going to win against Detroit. That's neither here nor there. I got the numbers right, so I get a point. Ron, you weren't on the show last week, so you didn't make a pick. Now's your time to make up some ground. What are you thinking? Blackhawks are at Seattle on Thursday, 9 o'clock on Chicago Sports Network. Saturday, Hockey Night in Canada, 9 o'clock on Chicago Sports Network here in the States. And Tuesday, they'll be back home against Anaheim, 7:30, also on Chicago Sports Network. Ron, how do you see this shaking out?
Johnny, I want to be optimistic here. I do. But I feel like every time we're optimistic about this Hawks team, they spit in your face when it comes to record predictions. I really do think they're unfortunately going to drop both of these games on the road. I think the one in Seattle will probably be a lot closer just because I think the Hawks match up maybe a little bit better with the Kraken than they do with the Canucks. Neither here nor there. I still think those 2 are losses, but I do think they will return to the United Center, especially after 2 days rest. For that Tuesday 7:30 start against the Ducks and take care of business at the UC. So I have 1-2-0 for these upcoming 3. And then I'll be in the building on that Thursday when they play the Florida Panthers. So we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next show. But for now, 1-2-0, Johnny. I really thought about going 1-1-1. The overtime thing for me has been kind of good so far this year.
You've been able to thread the needle on that so far.
I have, but I think I'm gonna be a little more conservative. I think with my picks here, we'll go 1-2-0 in this 3-game swing coming up.
All right, and I'm just logging those down. Yeah, Ron, this is tough. When we first came on the show, we didn't know if we were going to be previewing a set of 2 or 3. Now we've discussed it. We're going to do it 3. So I was going to say 1-1 if it was just a 2. So I got to stick with at least 1 win here and 1 loss. Man, this is tough. I hate to, my gut or my brain says I should follow in your footsteps, go 1-2-0. But
you have room to play with.
I should go. Yeah, my heart says I should go 2-1-0. So I think I'm going to do that because all that stuff that I talked about earlier in the show about returning to these lines that at least gave them some semblance of consistency, if you could call it that, at least maybe units that work well together. I'm hoping that translates against Seattle, and if not, step up on Hockey Night in Canada in Vancouver. Connor Bedard's going to be in front of a home crowd, so one of those, they got to win one of those for me. My record prediction to strike, and I have no doubt they'll take care of business against Anaheim on Tuesday. So I'm going 2-1-0. Although the up and down nature of this team, I think yours is a little bit safer, but mine's a little more fun.
It's good to have the complementary. Johnny, I think the Blackhawks need to play more complementary hockey, and I think it's okay that we have complementary record picks here. I like your optimism. I do. I would love to trail it, but I need some points, Johnny. So I need to go with logic over my heart here, and then that's what the 1-2-0 is about. Trust me, I would be very happy to be wrong and let you capture your 3rd point of the season, truly. But they got to play a little better hockey, and hopefully we get to see that in Game 1 of this 3-game stint coming up here that we'll talk about next time on the show in Seattle here on Thursday night.
Yep. All right. That about does it for this episode of Four Feathers. This was season 6, episode 8. Line blender, go brrr. All right. We'll see if some stability can bring the Hawks some more success rolling into this weekend and into early next week. For us here at Four Feathers, we appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you're subscribed over on YouTube at OnTap Sportsnet so you don't miss a show. Follow us on the socials at Four Feathers Pod and at OnTap Sportsnet. And as always, check out OnTapSportsnet.com for all your Chicago sports, literature, and podcasting needs. That'll do it for this edition of Four Feathers. Until next time, let's go Hawks.
Let's go Hawks, baby.